And thank you, Ben Bolopue, for joining me on this episode of the Brainy 8 Show. Ben, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, David.
My pleasure. So, Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about your initial exposure into Salesforce as a tool, your first impressions? Tell me what you thought.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, um, it was an interesting transition for me. I had just been approached by a higher ranking member of management with my company, and they said, "Hey, we've got this new position. We think you'd be a good fit for it." And at the time, I was a continuous improvement coordinator, and I was also doing some web work for the company. And so I was like, boy, I got all these things that are going on. And it was like 2000, when was that? About 2011 is when I
Hmm.
first came on. And so we were still not quite out of the housing recession.
Hmm.
Manufacturing was still being hit by that, and that's the industry that I work in. And
Hmm.
so I said, I've got all these things that are going on still, and I don't know if I could take on another thing. And he said, well, we're downsizing your position. And I said, I would love to take on this new role. It'd be fantastic. Um, so enter Salesforce. The first time I logged in was like November 2011, and it was as an admin. And we were
Hmm.
just going through the process of re-implementing the solution because it had not gone over very well the
Wow.
first time around. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I had all sorts of mixed emotions as to what is going on and how are we going about doing this. So it,
So
it
your first
was
exposure was a little bit of a horror show, it sounds like.
It was chaotic. It was chaotic. They flew me from Minnesota to Ohio to
Hmm.
sit behind a guy at a desk and kind of shadow him.
Hmm.
Um, and this guy was in the process of being organized out of the company as well. His
Right.
position was so he was staying on. He was a senior vice president, and he's doing administrative data entry
Wow.
things, And I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn from this guy, and he was
Wow.
fantastic about it. But
Hmm.
yeah, so it took me maybe a month or so, and I was fortunate enough to come back to Minnesota and take kind of it was a 5 day indoctrination class, where I really got
Hmm.
plugged in and saw the tool for what it was in an environment that wasn't chaotic.
Hmm.
And it was just like, oh my gosh, I can be creative
That's right.
with a tool. And that's amazing because that's a big part of who I am,
Right.
the creative side of my brain.
Yeah.
Um, it was a fantastic awakening, if you
Yeah.
will, to
So
all these different things.
it sounds to me like you sort of saw the image, and or I should say lived it, because it wasn't just an image, it was three-dimensional. You started experiencing the after, that horror show where the configuration might have been, to put it nicely, not as efficient as it could be, and people who are not necessarily trained as admins did the configuration, and suddenly you're looking, taking it back and looking in a pristine environment, getting trained on here's how it should be, and here's what the functionality can do for a new organization. That could be both overwhelming and enlightening, and it's a little bit of a shock. Like, wow.
Yeah, I was instantly evangelized. It
Hmm.
was it was
Yeah.
something else. It really was,
Hmm.
and it wasn't so much that we had an admin in my role before me. We
Hmm.
didn't, not a full-time admin, anyways. But we had an implementation partner that was, for lack of better terms, a yes man.
Hmm.
Can you do this? Yes. Can we have something like this? Yes. Can you make this do that? Yes, of course. Whereas, anybody that's been around the block working with a consultant before, a good consultant, from my perspective as a customer, is one that pushes back sometimes and
Hmm.
says, and from my experience, I understand where you're going with that, but you have to consider these things. We had an implementation partner that didn't ask those questions, that didn't push back a little bit,
Hmm.
and it bit us really hard, really hard. I spent years undoing some of the things that they did in our org. So, yeah, it was. I went to the training then and saw, like you said, this pristine environment, and I was like, "Holy cow, this could do amazing things!" And I
Yeah.
got excited. I did.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a very similar experience. So I was at GE when I was first introduced to Salesforce, and at the time I had no clue. I turned to my boss and I said, "What the heck is Salesforce? Is that one word or two? And why
Right.
we're using Siebel and it works well? Why on earth are we going to this thing called Salesforce?" And she was essentially like, "Just shut up and mind your own business and do what you're told." And I
Oh,
started,
okay.
yeah, we called it like we saw it. Yeah. Anyway,
Sure,
so
sure.
of course at GE they certainly provided me with a wealth of resources that I needed to do my job right, and they set us up with training, appropriate training on how to use Salesforce. And my experience was exactly the same as yours, where um, I sat there learning how to do it and sort of questioning, somewhat skeptical. Why are we using this new tool? And as soon as I learned things, I'm like, wow, this is really cool, both from an admin, from a technology, from a configuration perspective, as well as the end user, business person, non-technology person perspective. It's like this is really cool. And I had again similar response where I fell in love right away and I'm like, this is the coolest thing in the world.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So,
That first taste of raw Salesforce Kool-Aid is really sweet. It's
hmm
really sweet.
yeah, yeah,
That's the way my boss used to like to put it. He says, "You've drank the Kool-Aid, and it's apparent." And I'm fine with that. That's fine.
yeah, that totally works. Yeah. So,
Right.
tell me a little bit about your involvement within the Salesforce community. So, for those who are not familiar with the Salesforce community, how do you even define what is the Salesforce community? Like, what does that mean? And tell us a little bit about how you interact with others within the Salesforce community.
Sure. No, absolutely. That's an excellent question. I think that somebody would be hard pressed to put a very, granular definition on what the Salesforce community is, especially since the, onset of the terminology Ohana, right?
Hmm.
Um, because that brings out a whole new aspect of it. But to me, the community is kind of this nebulous thing, right? And it's taken on the form of support. It's taken on the form of Ohana or family. It's taken on the form of a lot of different things, all of which are amazing.
Yeah.
If there's a place for you working with Salesforce, there's a place for you in the community. There really is. Be it the success community. The first interaction that I had with anybody outside of my business was middle of June, the following year after I started as an admin in 2012. And I asked a question because I didn't know where to go for help.
Hmm.
And this is one of the big parts of the community is
Right.
that support side, right?
Yeah.
And I asked a question at like 11:30 p.m. And at 7 a.m., I had answers from Amber Boaz and from Steve Mollis, just sitting there waiting for me. And I was like,
Incredible.
I, right. I was like, I told my boss it'd be a week. I said I'd reach out to people and I'd see what I found. And,
Hmm.
hours later, and, after experiencing that part of the community more, it's very common, to ask a question and then within an hour have multiple responses. It's crazy. The folks that hang out and they dedicate, a certain amount of their time to helping on that portion of the community, they're amazing.
Yeah.
And here's the part that took me a little while to wrap my head around it. They actually don't get anything back
Right.
for helping, right? They do it
Hmm.
because one, they love helping people, and two, because they can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. This is fantastic. But the community also consists of, aside from, success.salesforce.com or admin.salesforce.com, there's also a huge part of the community which lives on Twitter, which is where I spend most of my time.
Yep.
And so there's either people that are coming to me with, direct message questions. I get a few of those a week where people are like, "Hey, I can't fit this question into 140 characters. Can you help me out with this?"
Yeah.
And there's also the hashtag AskForce,
Yep.
and that's great because that's like you're just spraying the community with a question, and whoever sees or follows that hashtag can respond to you. And the response rates are very similar to what they are on success.community.com or success.salesforce.com.
Hmm.
Um, so, and actually through Twitter, I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, you've
Yep.
probably
Yep.
realized that I use a ton of GIFs, and
Yep.
there's a group of us that we call ourselves the GIF Squad.
Yep.
It's kind of corny, cheesy, whatever.
Uh-huh.
But we're family. We're 11 people that are honestly like family. We see each other a couple of times a year in person,
Hmm.
but we actually talk every day, all damn day. Every day.
Awesome.
All
Awesome.
I told you before we started talking that I've got 4 computer monitors in front of me.
Hmm.
3 of them are all business, and the 4th one to my far left, that's a Twitter DM that just doesn't shut. It's there all day long. And Slack is also there. You know,
Right.
we have our own Slack channels, but and we've kind of grown. So we decided we've got this ability to help people on Salesforce at a Salesforce level, but we've also started doing fundraisers for like we've donated $600-700 to the Will I Am Angel Foundation, you
Wow,
know,
that is
STEM
really
technology stuff.
impressive. That is
Um,
nice.
because we sold these goofy T-shirts, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you go to if you go to thegiftsquad.com, you'll see a section on it, and what's even the I made the website. I can't remember what the name of the Giving Back, and that'll give you a link that goes directly over to represent.com where we have a storefront, and we sell these T-shirts. But still, we haven't moved off the topic of the Salesforce community
Yeah.
because that's what that is, the Gift
Yeah.
Squad. We're a part of the Salesforce community, you know,
Hmm.
and we don't get anything back out of doing that, but we're able to, and so we do it. And
It's
uh,
awesome.
you know that's what it's all about, right? So,
Very, very impressive. That's great. And it sounds like there's a lot of fun that's taking place at the same time. And I'm guessing that all day long you're not just talking Salesforce features, functionality, and problem solving. You're talking about things that go way above and beyond outside of Salesforce.
oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I know the names of the children of all these people, even their pets. You know, I mean,
Mm.
there's Samantha Safin is one of the gift squatters, and I know that she lives not I don't know what was it 25 minutes away from one of my favorite breweries in Michigan, and so I mean. Beer is a big topic of conversation. I'm not a connoisseur, but
Hmm.
I I'm an aficionado. I know I wouldn't even say that, but I know a little bit about it, and so do some of these other folks, you know. And we talk about family, sports, and yeah, you're right. You hit the nail on the head.
That is awesome. That's great stuff. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you've used Salesforce to solve for a particular business problem.
Ooh, all right. So use cases. This is
Yeah.
fantastic, right? So I'm a big process guy, and that's wear it on my sleeve. It's kind of my soapbox, and I'm a firm proponent of, you know, so long as you are able to meet the requirements of something, you've got a functional process, right? And then after you've refined it a little bit, maybe you work on the user experience with the focus of an interface or whatever it is,
Hmm.
then you start turning it from a process into a solution. It's my soapbox. I'll end it there. Sorry. So so in our business, the one that I work in for Quantix, um, we use territory sales managers
Hmm.
to manage. I think in the States we've got 9 different territories, and so just looking at North America, right? And so we've got for each of those territory sales managers, which is easy enough to assign, you know, with the territory assignment rules. We've got a support group, you know, so it's a customer service person or it's tech services or it's whatever. And so while Salesforce gives us the ability to quite easily, you know, assign ownership and, you know, access via territory management, if you want to get a little bit more granular control of the automatic assignment of that support network that goes along with managing an account, you've got to get a little creative.
Right.
So I decided initially to just build a ginormous formula, and
Hmm.
it was an if formula mixed with a case function with, I mean, and it was like a mile long. It was ridiculous, completely unmanageable, and I was hitting my limits. And I was like, oh, I need to get creative. Come on.
Yeah.
Um, and I was actually kind of disappointed in myself because I'm like, hey, I should have taken a little bit more time. But I was focusing on it only from the perspective of I need to meet these requirements,
Right.
and I don't care how I do it, I need to do it.
Right.
So knee-jerk
Very
reaction,
common.
right, right. Knee-jerk reaction, I went, okay, I'm going to build a formula that's just going to say if these criteria are met, then assign this person as a CSR, assign this person as whatever, and so on and so forth. Um, Well, I got about an hour down that road, and I was like, this is stupid. I've got all these tools at my disposal, and I haven't thought this through. So took a step back. I left the formula as it was, which was functioning by itself, but I just couldn't expand it, and it was hard to manage.
Right.
Um, and so I brought in a little bit of process builder, which looked at that formula and said, if it meets these criteria, then do this instead of that. And I set up two different layers of criteria for each role that need to be associated with it. And I triggered that process builder via a field update, right?
Hmm.
So I kind of used a little creativity. I went, well, I'm going to have this trigger the process builder after I update that field. So now it's a matter of how do I update that field?
Right.
Quite simply, I'm going to use Flow and Visual Force. So I
Right.
built a flow, and it said, like I said, we still use Classic. You click on a button, pulls up a Visual Force page, which brings in all these parameters, from the account record that it was clicked on, fills out a whole bunch of stuff in the background. It considers a whole slew of things, and then once you make one single selection from a pick list, you hit finish, and because it's on a Visual Force page, you can say when you hit finish, then go back to this page,
Hmm.
and it's done. So from an administrative standpoint, there's a big formula, there's a process builder involved, there's some flow, there's Visual Force stuff, and I utilize all those things for scalability purposes, really.
Right.
But from a user experience, they have to click one button, they make one selection, and then they click finish, and they're done. So now we can make exceptions to rules that are in place, and we can, customize things to the hilt from the user's perspective, and without, going too far into the weeds as to exactly what all the details are. That's where I'm going to stop at the detail level.
Hmm.
But it's really cool. I showed it to some of our customer service managers, and they're like, "So seriously, we just have to click that, and then I make a selection in a pick list, right?" And I said, "Yes." And then you click finish, and then everything else just does what it's supposed to do. And I went, "You are correct."
Yeah.
And I thought, I mean, they're an 11-hour drive away from me, but I could feel the hug. I could
Right.
feel the hug
Right.
that they were sending me. So it's cool. It's really cool, and it allowed us to meet all the requirements, which were the automatic assignment of support people, and the other part of the requirement was the ability to customize it as necessary.
Hmm.
Um, and that was it. It was done.
It's pretty magical, when so it's one thing as the admin or the person on the receiving end of getting a business requirement and not really sure how am I going to solve for it. Maybe it's a workflow, maybe it's process builder, maybe it's a combination, maybe a formula field. I don't really. Maybe I need to get my developer friends involved. And then when
Right.
you've put together the individual pieces, and then you go through that use case and you see it work, it is, aside from the end users appreciating, oh wow, yeah, it worked, because sometimes they don't really get it. They just sort of assume, of course Salesforce is going to do it, yeah, duh. um, but for the person who's actually building it out, we really don't necessarily always know, is it truly going to work as expected? And then watching that happen, that's like watching the birth of, I'm sorry, a child being born. It's like this or my kids and wife are going to kill me if they ever hear this. But but it's, I mean, it's a product of essentially your imagination, your creativity to solve for a particular problem, and it didn't exist prior to your involvement. And once it works, it's like it's an awesome feeling. It's empowering. It gives you a feeling of, I just helped the organization with what otherwise would have been a disaster of Excel spreadsheets coming and going all over the place, or manual data entry, or clicking all over the place. And it's a wonderful feeling. That's great.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I get it. I mean, the whole the kid thing. Yeah, I get it. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a passion that you have, and you go into it and you get energetic about it, and you see it for the first time in somebody else's hands, right?
Right.
And
Right.
for me, that's when the magic happens, because I know what happens when I push the button,
Hmm.
but when somebody else pushes the button and it works as though you just pushed the button, which
Right.
is the hope, you're like,
Right.
it is magical. It
So,
absolutely
so I
is.
will tell you, sometimes I take a rather should I use the word sinister approach by implementing something that someone asked for, and I just go ahead and I
Okay.
implement the solution, and I don't necessarily make a big fuss. I don't make an announcement. I don't tell anyone that like the problem that maybe a few people were struggling with. I put in the solution for it, and then later on I see someone saying, "Oh wow, look at that! I as soon as I hit save, the following automatically happened. That never happened before." And I sort of sit there, behind them, just grinning, like, yep, sort of giving them the assumption that it sort of was always there, even though it wasn't. So, it's not necessarily about the pride of like
Right.
bragging. Yeah, I implemented it. It's more of the pride of seeing your solution work.
Oh, absolutely. You're kind of off in the background of the shot, and you see that happen, and it zooms in on you, and you kind of
Right.
wink and say, "You're welcome, user," and you go about
Exactly.
your day.
Precisely.
They never know what's going on.
Yep. Yep. So it's funny that you bring up that type of solution that you've implemented before to solve for a particular business problem. So let me sort of turn the conversation a little bit. A lot of times we look for to solve for a particular business problem, and the solution is already out there on the App Exchange. So let me ask you about of the various apps that are out there on the App Exchange, which two would you say are your favorite and why? Like, give a little bit of some of the scenario, the use case of how whichever two apps stand out to you. What problem is it that they solve, or what was it like before utilizing that particular app, and what value does it bring to the table?
Sure, absolutely. So with as powerful as Salesforce is, there's limitations and there's things that it can't do out of the box, right? That's why we can customize things, and they're
Hmm.
constantly coming out with
Yeah.
revisions and these releases 3 times a year. And
Hmm.
so two of them. So there's I'll give you one free one and one
Hmm.
that is sort of free, but if you really want it, it costs a little bit of money, and it's
Hmm.
both are very inexpensive. So the one is Roll-Up Helper. I
Yep.
mean, it's always been one of the top apps on the App Exchange, and it's because it does what Salesforce doesn't allow us to do, which is create roll-up summaries between two objects that are not related via a master detail relationship.
Hmm.
So if I just have a regular old, lookup from, record A or object A to object B, that's not a master detail. Before Roll-Up Helper, I couldn't do anything. If I
Hmm.
wanted to sum or count or do whatever, show me all the records that are associated with this record that are of this other object, I couldn't do that. But with
Hmm.
Roll-Up Helper, it's a beautiful thing. Um, Very, very quick to set up and to tell it what to do. The free version, you can create 3 roll-ups
Hmm.
between object A and object B, and those will update, per when you tell them to. I have mine set up, all 3 of mine is set up to update daily,
Hmm.
um, just for the scenario that I'm in.
Right.
And it's fantastic, and it's free. If you want to go beyond that, create more than 3, or else if you want things to update in real time,
Hmm.
then there is a paid version of it. But I've been really, really happy with the free version of it. It's slick. So
Nice.
um, let's see here. Oh, and the other one. Uh, so kind of like with everything else, it's a matter of the right tool for the job. It may not be the best tool, it may not be the cheapest, it may not be whatever, but if it's the right tool, it's the right tool. So
Hmm.
we had a need where we needed to be able to, via the click of a couple buttons, generate documents. And I
Yep.
know that there are, a plethora of, different document generators that are out there. We landed on one called SDocs.
Yep.
And SDocs, we do have the paid version of it, although there is a free version.
Hmm.
Um, and I really like SDocs because it's quick, it's simple, it's pretty cost effective. And when you're building out your actual templates that are to be used for this document generation, you've got SOQL that you can throw in there. You've got Apex, so you can use HTML. There's Visual Force aspects of it, and there's
Hmm.
also some SDocs specific, features that go into the code side of things. You don't have to. You can
Right.
absolutely use their WYSIWYG editor to, the what you see is what you get editor
Hmm.
to design things aesthetically. but you can use this solution, which is relatively cheap comparatively.
Right.
You can use this solution to do really complex heavy lifting. That's where the SOQL
Wow.
side of things comes in,
Wow.
where you can say, based on this record, show me, and then you set up a SOQL query to build a table out on this document based on the criteria present and the values of the record where it was originated from. It's
Wow.
um, it's a pretty powerful tool. So bang for the buck.
Mhm.
SDocs has been amazing for us. It really has been. We've got people in 3 continents using SDocs right now. So
Wow. Wow.
it's nifty. It's really, really nifty. So
So
yeah,
could
those are my
you?
two.
Okay, so 2 points. First of all, for those who are listening, I'm going to put the links to the roll-up help. First of all, the Gift Squad that we talked about earlier. I'm also going to put the direct links to Rollup Helper and SDocs from the App Exchange in the show notes for this episode, so you guys can quickly access them and take your learning and experience further outside of this particular episode. But my question for you, Ben, is I'm very familiar with the business need that cuts across really all industries for generating documents from within
Oh
Salesforce.
yeah.
But a lot of people are not even familiar with like what is the type of use case. So could you give us some examples of how within your organization you're leveraging SDocs functionality? Like for what? What is the output and who is using it and why?
Sure. No, absolutely. So
Hmm.
um, our industry is manufacturing,
Hmm.
and you wouldn't think that you would have to, in manufacturing, you've got a quality tech or a service tech or whatever, and why do they need to generate documents? Well, the biggest use case for our tech service folks in the United States is that we go out and do audits on various things to make sure that our customers or else our vendors are compliant with the use of our products.
Hmm.
Um, so when they go out and they do these audits, they've got to be able to then compile all the information that they've collected, and then they've got to get signatures from everybody, and they've got to send things out, whatever. And program to date, up until about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, this was a manual process. So you'd go out and you'd have a notebook, or if you were lucky enough to have a laptop that was,
Hmm.
able to go out on the manufacturing floor, you'd have Excel or whatever. Then they got fancy and they went into Access, and it's like, oh, don't do. Anyways, they did it. So, but that's where they were collecting all of this information, and then they were manually compiling all of it. And so, what happens if you have 10 people doing the same thing and it's not a standardized process and you don't have standardized methodologies or tools is that you're going to get 10 different results. You're going to
Right.
have some things that sometimes look good and sometimes have a header and sometimes have a table and sometimes have your name on it,
Hmm.
and sometimes they don't
Yeah.
because you haven't
Yeah.
standardized anything. This document creation tool, and really this is the crux of almost all of the document creation tools you're going to come across, is
Hmm.
quickly takes values that exist in Salesforce, puts them into a standardized format, and then lets you do stuff like create PDFs or a Word
Hmm.
document if you wanted to, or even an email. It'll create an HTML email that you can send right out to the contact that's associated with the record.
Hmm.
Um, so there's a lot of automation involved, and to me, that's half of it. The other
Yeah.
half of it is the standardization part of
Right.
it.
Right. Right. So I think what I'm hearing is that for the typical business user, it makes it super easy to sort of churn out or spit out a template document using information that they've already captured that's in Salesforce. Essentially, click a button and it's going to generate whether it's a proposal or a report of the field service visit or a summary of, here are the activities that we've logged against your record over the last 3 months, whatever it might be. So for the end user, what I'm hearing is it provides a lot of efficiencies for them, and for let's call it the legal compliance and marketing side of the house, from
Yes.
we've got the branding taken care of because it's already set in stone. So everyone's using the right logo, the right fonts, the right words. So nobody's getting in trouble. So they feel totally cool with folks out in the field generating these documents without marketing and legal getting all bent out of shape over
Oh yeah.
free for all. And from a senior management perspective, we simply know that everyone's doing their job and we're working efficiently.
Yes, and there's two more facets to it that I think are important
Mm-hmm.
to bring up. One is that it's a safety net as well. It
Mm-hmm.
is if I'm entering things in manually and I'm typing things up manually, and this
Mm-hmm.
has happened,
Yeah.
there are times when we've accidentally given somebody a 10% discount instead of
Right.
a 1% discount because
Right.
of their compliance. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, hey, that's awesome. Thanks so very much. Uh, um, and we go, oh, no, 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 but it's already been signed
Right.
and it's already done, right? It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
crap. Um, explain that one with one of your biggest customers. It was a
That's right.
typo.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so,
We
and the
meant
other
to
side
add
of it,
an extra zero.
yeah, yeah, I'm so sorry about that. But the other side of it is that the other facet is to some people this may just sound like mail merge, right? They're like,
Right.
oh, well, mail merge has been around since the 90s, you know. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, I've got a Excel database over here, and I'm going to pull values into Word or Outlook or whatever. Well, right, it does that. Don't get me wrong, it does that. Mail merge functionality based on the record that it's pulled from, but there's also the logic that's in there. So
That's
in the
right.
event, a real quick example, in the event that you're missing a piece of information, but you still need to use a certain template, the logic that you build into these templates can say, if this field is blank, then say this instead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for people that don't have systems that can do that, but they do have systems that do mail merge, you know it because you'll get a mass email and it says, good morning, and then there'll be a couple of blanks and there'll be a comma. And it's
Right.
like, there should be a name there, right? They don't have that conditional logic that says if there's no first name, then give them a different greeting.
Mm-hmm.
They've just got, they don't have that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of benefits to investigating the automated, production of documents.
Yeah. Absolutely. I could not agree more, and especially with my legal background, yeah, I'm a huge proponent of having standardized documentation from within Salesforce, because I just see the efficiencies really trickling down to all parts of the organization, and guess what? Right back to the customer.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And they are at the end of every road, right? The
Yeah,
customer's at the end of every road.
yeah,
Whatever benefits you will eventually benefit them. And as a business, that eventually gets out. Hey, these guys know their stuff, they're standardized in their processes, and it makes working with them really, really easy.
yeah,
That word gets out.
yeah. That's absolutely true. Very cool. Thank you for the insight. Next question. We talked a little bit about the Salesforce community, and we talked about how you've definitely leveraged the Salesforce community to network among other friends and develop some really cool friendships that go beyond Salesforce. And you've also talked about how how you've leveraged the community in order to solve for not only one but many different challenges that you've come across. So I guess my question to you is: have you experienced, from just a career development perspective, have you experienced or have you witnessed some scenarios where people have leveraged the Salesforce community to essentially advance their own career, to find, whether it's the skill set, to find the job, to take their own career to the next level?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So on a personal level,
Hmm.
um, you know, I honestly think that I am a more valuable employee because of the community, and it's for a couple of very specific reasons, one of which we've touched on a couple of times.
Hmm.
The community, if you're involved with it, it keeps you creative. It keeps you thinking about new things. It keeps new things in front of you, if nothing else. And it presents you with these opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have to pull out old tools and dust them off and to use them.
Hmm. Yeah,
I believe that I am honestly a more valuable employee to Quanix,
yeah,
my employer,
yeah.
because my tools that I don't use in my everyday, they're getting used periodically when I
Right.
help somebody in the community, or else I'm furthering my knowledge of things because of people in the community. So there's
Hmm.
the creative side of it, and there's the maintenance side of it as well.
Yeah.
As far as what I've seen the community help other people with, quite recently, quite
Hmm.
recently, there have been, I don't know, I've had three people that have suffered inadvertent attrition, right?
Yep.
They've been downsized or else companies closed or whatever.
Hmm.
The community is there for you in these situations.
Yep.
The conversations that you have, the networking side of it, the communication, the back channels. There's always a private way to ask somebody a question. Hey, here's my scenario. Um,
Yep.
the community has led to each of these people finding new homes,
Yeah.
finding new jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not a LinkedIn, it's not a Glassdoor, it's not whatever. It's hard to describe until you've partaken in it.
Hmm.
Um, it's nothing official. It's everybody's there because they want to be, and you get to know people.
Right.
Mike Gerholt's got this topic or this concept of SABAW, right? Salesforce administration by walking around.
Hmm.
Uh, at, at the core of that is actually talking to people. It's
Yeah.
actually like, not just a text, not a tweet, not a snap, not a whatever.
Absolutely.
It's a conversation.
Yeah.
And I've said this in other presentations that I've made. I think that's a lost art. It's becoming a lost art,
Yeah.
face-to-face communication, or
Hmm.
else just verbal communication.
Hmm. No,
Doing
it's
that.
absolutely
Oh, go
true.
ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to
Oh,
say
yeah.
that's absolutely true. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Well, in doing that, you learn about people, and you better believe that if I know somebody, if I've had a couple of heart-to-hearts, if I've shared a couple of beers with them, if I've whatever, and sharing a beer with somebody that's on a different continent, it happens because you have a video chat going and you're each drinking something from the local store. But that happens.
Hmm.
But you have those, more personal level interactions with people that the community facilitates all the time, and you better believe that I'm going to be more comfortable saying to the people that I know that are looking for an employee, hey, I know a person.
That's right.
And I'm going to tell that person about you. If it's okay, I'm going to give them your contact information. I think they'd be a really good fit, both professionally and personally, because that's a side of things that a lot of employers are looking for.
Right.
Are you going to be a good fit with this team?
Hmm.
Because you can be the sharpest expert on whatever the subject matter is, but if you're a schmuck and you don't get
Right.
along with the guys on the team, it's
Right.
it's it's done. It's a
Right.
done deal.
Right.
you know.
Or you might
Um,
be the most personable individual, and you might have the right level of experience, but through the conversations, through the interaction, through the relationships, you already know that this person does not want to stay in that type of career. They're looking for a change of some kind. So at the same time, you know
Absolutely.
that this person is not necessarily the right fit for different reasons.
Yep, absolutely. And it's that lost fine art of actually, talking to folks. Um,
Hmm.
that gives you that advantage. And like I said, the community facilitates that advantage.
Yeah,
You just need to partake.
absolutely. That's fantastic insight. Thanks for sharing. That's great. So let me ask you this. If you had one piece of advice to give to someone who is relatively new to the world of Salesforce, what would you share with them? What insights would you share with them?
Ah, so I got the opportunity to do this just the other day, and so
Hmm.
this is kind of fresh in my brain.
Hmm.
Um, three, three, three big points. Be open, be honest and humble,
Hmm.
and leave preconceived notions at the door is the third one. If you come into a scenario where you're like, I know exactly how we're going to conquer this. And I don't care
Hmm.
if it's Salesforce, specific or not. This goes for anything, but it's a big one with Salesforce. You lose out on so much if you walk into something not being those things. If you're not open, if you're not honest, if you're not humble, and if you come into something just loaded up with these preconceived notions of how things should be, or the way that you're going to make them, or whatever,
Hmm.
um, you miss out on a lot. You
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
So take that with take
Yeah.
that as you will.
No, that's great. Definitely valuable, sage insight and wisdom. Because a lot of you're right. A lot of people they say, oh well, that's not how we did it at the last place. As a matter of fact, just this morning I was on a call with someone who said, the last place where I worked, where we used Salesforce, we had a button on the opportunity screen, and the button was called blah blah blah. And why don't we have that here? And I sort of had to
Right.
reel myself back and basically explain, well, Every company is
Yeah,
different. I can't explain why they had it there or who decided
right.
on it, but we don't have it here. Welcome to our world.
That's right.
So yeah,
You notice the sign on the door is different here than it was the last place too.
right.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
or
Oh, we're
maybe
not
you
going to
notice
put.
maybe you notice the paycheck is coming from somewhere else. So right.
Yes, yes.
But
Things are
either
different
way,
now.
it's
I'm sorry.
take the preconceived notions. I mean, it goes exactly back to your point. Take the preconceived notions, and sorry, that does not necessarily apply here, and there might be good reasons why. Just because you did it that way before does not necessarily mean that is the appropriate way to do it here. But if that's
Right.
what you truly want, we could discuss it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. Ben, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I really appreciate it. I think the listeners will value tremendously your insights and wisdom that you've shared, the experiences that you've shared, and I look forward to having you back on the show at some point again in the not too distant future.
Awesome. Always a pleasure talking to you, David. Thanks for having me on, sir.
Yep, thank you.